Hasn't started. The scale of the malfeasance people have no concept of. I've just done a search. The most conservative, true debt to GDP when you count in unfunded liabilities, Medicaid, welfare in America is in the 450-550 range, according to Grok. Chicago professors had it at 660. That was in 2018 or 19. It was that long ago. The more aggressive, the more mainline, and most assumptions aren't going to be met. You're probably through 1,000. It's unpayable. It's unpayable. And the commitments that were made are going to be reneged upon as well. So you're talking about a whole base, people that paid for a certain service, and they're going to be told, sorry, this just when they need it, as a pensioner or someone who's now long-term ill, they're going to be told, well, you need to make a contribution, you need a family member to pay, or we have to do this, or we can only offer you this, a whole reduced service, which will be very rudimentary. There's quite a lot coming down the chute our way, and the debt is unpayable. It's mathematically unpayable, and the American debt level is the worst, and they fall off the highest ladder. But the West as a whole is going to do very badly. America does worst, then the rest of the West just behind it. In some senses, some bits will be maybe sooner. I've thought for a while, maybe the United Kingdom will have a debt crisis before America. Their rates have gone higher than Americans on the same benchmark debt. They are clearly going to collapse. But, France, Europe, there's going to be collapses there too. There's master puppeteers that have an agenda that everything is going pretty well for them in terms of that, and not too good for the layman who thinks that the future is random. What do? You hunker down, you prepare for a fight, you get remote, you get out of the war zones, you get out of the worst affected nations, you build business, you use the internet and scalability to do that, and you value add to people.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the WTFinance podcast. On this episode, I have the pleasure of welcoming back a very popular guest who's been on the podcast a few times, Francis Hunt. So Francis, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Delighted to be back with you. Thank you for asking.
No problem at all. Looking forward to speaking. And we were saying there's a lot that's happened since we last spoke. So I'm sure we'll be able to take this to many different places. But where I like to start with all my guests is starting very broad. So what are you currently seeing, I guess, in the macro and the economy and what's happening around the world?
You can't be looking at what's going on in the world and not be talking about two very clear, distinct things. One, gold melt up out of an upside HVF that we'd been expecting to go up. Then it did a fake run. We said, okay, watch out. It might have a soft month end before running. It didn't. It's actually, we were expecting it would probably break the 1st of September. It started to run in August and is now in the melt up to the upside that we anticipated on an ongoing basis to ever higher numbers. We've got a target out of this technically, which we can take you into on the charts in a minute or two. But you asked what other things. So let me just answer more in the broad before I get all technical. What other things am I wanting? The other thing is long end debt. Now we're just getting it coming a little bit down on the 10s and the across the world, but long end debt, Japan, France, UK, we did a YouTube on all the European nations showing they were all in upside continuations. You've got to mention the UK. I understand you're based there at the moment, and of course the US. So the collapse of the debt markets is something you're going to hear me say early in every interview. And we continue. So here's how markets and economic modeling should work. You keep getting affirmation for a certain kind of take, keep doubling down on that take. If you keep getting something that doesn't make sense and is contrary to a take, adjust your take, relook at it, look at the facts. And our primary takes, a lot of people will criticize us on YouTube for being, oh, you're wrong about this and wrong about that, because we'll talk on a technical time frame. It could go down first before it's going up. And they'll say, you said it was going to crash. Generally, we've spent since 2009, when I started my own YouTube channel and started to have an audience, saying you need to be long gold and you need to get out of debt. Two simple things. And we continue to get the advancing manifestation of that. And in 2009, you were yet to have QE 1, 2, 3, 4, and twist when we started with that view. And we're still holding that view, and we've traded that view. You want to be short debt, long gold. It's simple. And the rotation is in place. So that's a foundational statement that I can hand back to you, and you can choose where you want to drill down.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for laying that out. And maybe if we take a step back and really the thinking behind, as you're saying, it's like it's gotten to the point where governments have taken the easy way out. Rather than cutting spending, or rather than going out through other avenues, have just kept issuing debt, and now it's gotten to the point where they can't. This is actually having consequences. They can't issue any more debt with the higher rates. It's going to it is basically bankrupting these countries, and it seems like sort of on the way to a default. So is that sort of the trajectory that you're seeing, and then maybe how did we get here?
Well, how did we get here is because we had, after me, the storm politicians that recognized the easiest way to tax people is to tax them by sleight of hand, which is inflation. And inflation is all excess government expenditure. So you never get voted in again if you're the guy who brought in a tax increase. You do get voted in again if you promise money for lots of people and you buy them all in as that you're their guy. Welfare, unemployment, steel workers, teachers' pensions, push this up, push that up. You get re-elected if you give gifts. So what you actually have is a phony game of giving bad gifts that shouldn't be given, building up a lot of IOUs that taxes everybody. In the initial instance in currency debasement, but at the end of cycle, once you've had all these tertiary extracting proliferators working their magic on your behalf, you end up with an entire system collapse. So it's kind of like there's a way to eat and live, and there's a way not to eat and live. And I say, never mind, let's have fun, party, snort cocaine, inject some drugs, eat fast food, and then shock horror. We're always having fun, and every time we get depressed, we take uppers and everything else, and we just live a life of complete hedonism without any self-imposed discipline. We get politicians who lie to us about that to make it easier for you to consume. It's not really a drug. It's not really a recreational drug. It's good for you. Do this. Okay, happy days. And no one inquires, and we carry on. So it comes out of a captured political system and uneducated financially people, because educated financial people, when they start saying we're going to give more welfare to the poor, should say we're voting you out. You want to destroy currency. It's not about that. You need that. But unfortunately, in a very feminized society, it gets, the emotionally sounding things, and the PR and the media management are actually far more powerful tools, and they'll get quite sane, even intelligent people to just feel good factor about lots of promises of largesse on a, fly today, pay tomorrow type basis. And then all those tomorrows come home at once, and then you have a system-ending event. And that's where we are. So that's the answer to how did we get there. I'm not sure if there was a second part to that question.
Yeah, so I guess how did we get here, and then what does this look like? Or I guess even going on from your sort of previous statement and what you were talking about there, was it the 70s where we shifted away from the old system with the sort of dollar pegged to the gold, or would you go even further back to the Great Depression and sort of the devaluation of the dollar, and basically people say it was basically a default on debt? When would you say there was a real shift?
There were lots of pivots and falsifications. There were wise men that once said government will elect more government and continue to crowd out the private world and head towards Marxism, which is basically a Bolshevik communistic ruling class, which is where I think we are going. We have very totalitarian, very full of themselves, Humpty Pumpty, telling the citizenry how it's going to be, like they're supreme in some sense. Governments. I'm all for very small governments that were afraid of their citizenry, rather than very large Bolshevik bullying governments with police forces that regiment social media laws and suppression on wrongthink. And their citizens are scared of the government. I think we've gone way too far. I think you need actually heads on sticks moments. I would start with von der Leyen and Agent Orange, just to show that the girls can be decapitated too. I'd probably throw in Tony Blair and a few others. If I'm dealing, UK, European, I definitely have Starmer's head on a stick, and you say this is what happens to people that pervert justice, that sell their country down the river and don't fear the consequences of the people. The problem is we have a blackmail racket that is very sophisticated and well run via Mossad and the other intelligence agencies, that actually coerces, synchronizes, and pushes all sorts of dark, violent, aggressive acts, and puts all the wrong people in power to continue to mitigate that which they seek. So that's really where it starts, and you have to start studying the origin of humanity and the banking cartel. It was in about the mid 1700s, I believe it is, that the Sassoons, Jewish opium peddlers into China, married into the European Ashkenazi family of the Rothschilds. So there's been forces that have been establishing networks of banker control, drug chain control, supply chain control on all sorts of nefarious activities, including child trafficking and many things else. So they are businesses in and of people, and they have actively sought out, well-moneyed and married into the clan, and ensured that by bloodline they are deep in the system. And they sit back and they have actors and people that they have the goods on do nefarious actions that they daren't ever do good ones or anything against the cult, lest they be exposed for their own crimes, which are clearly on camera. And so you almost, to join the club, you kill to join the club, is how I'd imagine it to be. And there's many writings that actually show that to be the case. And unfortunately, the most psychopathic people do get to the top, because they're relentless. And that's where we are. The psychopaths run the asylum.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be the case. And then what is this? But this, I'm guessing this end state isn't good for anyone who's in power, because it does seem to cause chaos and disorder, and, as you said, potential. I feel like there is
about the most
in Europe.
dispassionate group of people who will now fully be in charge and will soon have biometric ID, facial network, entire server farms built with your tax money that are weaponized against you, tracking and tracing you, and they intend to reduce the population. I can almost assure you the global population will come down immensely by the time this entire process is concluded, and particularly in the West. And that is why little anecdotes like the Deagle stats shouldn't be ignored, that actually we're seeing 66% reduction of the US population. By the way, you're sitting in one of the biggest reduction population places. The United Kingdom was due over 70% reduction, and it's a horrible situation, and it's across all Western Europe. It seems very specifically targeted to white European nations as well now. You've got to remember the Russians had their Bolshevik slaughter, and I don't see the same population changes there in the Deagle stat. So it gets into pretty dark topics. The question is, you can get bummed out and depressed by the things I'm saying, or you can decide what to do about it. And let's talk more about that. First of all, from a financial point, you need to be able to stay in all forms of financial systems and to be accumulating wealth in an environment where there is huge debt debasement. There's a deep risk of bank balances being lost, counterparty risks on shares, which you don't really own because you don't have the certificates, a la the great taking and other people's good work in that space, of which Mr. Webb is one, and all sorts of system failure where they go, well, hey, we never had it. Well, we were doing this, well, we're doing that. There's going to be a lot of angry people. So I think they want you de-armed and as least dangerous as possible. If we were really a warrior tribe, we would have been putting leaders' heads and bankers' heads on stakes long time ago for crimes that should have happened in 2008 when they were bailed out and they socialized the cost onto the people. But we just kept eating it because too few people understood what was going on, and too few of those people that understood had the courage to do anything apart from create NSA, CIA, skunk works, Bitcoin, and tell you, we're really angry at the banking cartel. Here's your freedom. It's totally decentralized, which is a fairy tale. That is a front-running psyop that gets ahead of any narrative of anybody who was thinking that the banking cartel seems pretty evil bunch and got bailed out at the expense of the masses. Eventually, even what they do, you can't hide because it has repercussions on a grand scale. But you should know that you're not in a system that is equitable or fair. So every time you hear the word racism or all the isms that were created and equity and build back better, you should know this is just word salads for placating the masses whilst they continue within an agenda which is totalitarian, greatly reduce the population and do everything. So you need to get safe, you need to get secure, you need to get out of the West, you need to maintain your finances, for which gold and silver will play a massive role. And at the same time, you need self-reliance, because government-based services will probably get reduced immensely because of the inability to borrow. That's why we say our most significant call is the end of the 40-year bull market in debt, which was late 2020. And it was 4 years before it was largely accepted by the best minds. And most YouTube commentators at the moment have no comprehension of what that means. Anybody says, don't worry, after the next crisis, they'll just print again. Or anybody who says, yeah, but they'll just borrow it into existence, or they'll buy it, or they'll monetize it themselves. No, they don't understand the debt system. There is a banking cartel that was afforded the exorbitant privilege of borrowing your money into existence, and they are extracting an interest payment, which is getting ever higher on the long end. To buy or do anything in government where your government is spending more than they get in, and all of them are doing it, ergo my point, synchronized leper colony where everyone is sick with the same sickness and kisses the chief leper when they enter, all of them are in that state. So you end up in a situation that they have to keep borrowing, and the debt instrument is an asset for somebody else who's receiving the income streams, and it's a liability for the government that's borrowed that money into existence and has to pay interest. And who's actually paying that interest? Well, the government doesn't have income. It gets taxation from you. You are the collateral, and those bankers view you as the collateral. And in any cull, I'm sure the land and a lot of other things will be made available very cheap, and BlackRock and Vanguard and other proxies for the legacy families will be buying off all your assets for pennies in the pound in the next collapse that could even have started now. The good news is that when you have a debt-based collapse, money, while it's still fluid and can move, runs into things that are preservational, and the primary monetized preservational asset is gold. And you are seeing that being manifested now. So everyone should be a gold stacker. Everyone should consider that they have no money. They have a promise of possible money when you have credits in a bank. The sooner you turn that promise of possible money into hard money that you physically hold, and possession is 9/10 of the law. That is why they want to bring a digital financial world over you, so that they can establish proxies in between you and the things you use that are physical. So eventually they can have a full rentier society where you own nothing and everything is on subscription, which will see a corporate fascist subscription model by all these megacorps like Google that are busy doing a $40 million campaign to promote Netanyahu's pro-Israeli message throughout the world in an environment where you have one tribe that is actively genociding in plain sight, right down to 2-3-year-old toddlers, to remove them so that they can steal and take the entire land from a people that have been there for 3,000, 5,000 years. And when you do blood DNA tests, are actually the descendants of Shem, while the Ashkenazi are not. That's where you're at. That's where you're at. And we're all looking the other way and letting it happen, because you've got governments and politicians that are not directing the agenda there, and media that is not directing the agenda there. So we're in a severe situation. I'm not going to tell anybody that. I don't know how many years. If I'm healthy enough to live to 95, I don't think I necessarily get there. Let's just put it that way. But that's okay. We were born for these times, and we've got to operate, but you've got to take serious plans. You've got to build your wealth through investing in gold and silver, doing something preferably online that you can do in the matrix so that you can scale, whilst at the same time developing a second tier existence that's remote and offline, and keeps EMF out of your life, keeps vaccines and other medical interventions as much as possible out of your life, but expect them to crowd out all the systems till eventually, if you don't have a biometric ID, you won't be able to drive, you won't be able to pay for your property taxes, you won't be able to do anything. You'll have to have a unique portal. And that's what's coming, but it will take some time. So there's still some living we can do before everybody realizes they've become a second tier human being run by a supremacist human being master race that thinks they're a master race, that are the primeval psychopaths. And then you are just cattle to them. You're the ant farm. They can stand on as many as they like. They think it's overpopulated world now. It's quite clear that all these BBC World and nature programs, while sucking you in for the nature, keep pushing out a message that there's too many humans on the planet, and they've always wanted to do a mass genocide. So they are inherently genocidal people, and they would want to seek to reduce the population. So be remote, where they actually might need the odd human somewhere. Namibia is not a bad start, for example. It's pretty dark, but at the same time, every day the sun comes up, you've got a beautiful life, you're fit and healthy, you must seize each moment. Even if this was all puppy dogs and apple pie, the truth of the matter, people still would die. And if you think every day you've got as many as far as you can see, you wouldn't live as intensely as you would live as you can now. These could be the best years of your life. You just don't want to be starving, hungry, and bullied by a state into doing things that will probably end up terminating your health ahead of schedule. And I would say the best way to be that is to be richer, wealthier. And I know someone will be watching this and be where I was when I was 25, not two beans to rub together. And the point of the matter is just start. The process of just starting and giving value is an acceleration of life and maturity. Sometimes parents died and the oldest son had to look after the family and be dad, and they often turned into incredible characters. Sometimes you get maturity forced onto you before your time. And you've just got to seize the nettle, because this is your experience. And we are having an experience here on planet Earth, or disk Earth, or depending how you want to view it. We're having an experience, and the experience will end for all of us at some point. But I do fear the short-term future for the large under-awakened masses. And that's what we focus in our community. How can we help you build greater wealth? How can we help you enjoy your life and secure more freedoms? That's going to be a lot about freedom of movement, multiple places of residency, bank accounts that are not part of the Western access, etc., etc. But I will say this agenda is broadly universal too. So, they're going to be doing a lot of, there's some uniformity in everything, but there's also some cracks and some arbitrage that can be exploited. And that's where we live and exist.
Okay, thanks for laying that out. Yeah, quite a lot of really important messages there. And if I say I'm the skeptic and push back and say, they've always found a way to fix the system, they've always found a way to, as you said, inject lots of money. And, people have been talking about the collapse of the fiat monetary system for, last 20 plus 30 years, the issues with debt, etc. So what would you say to those people who come with that argument and say, they can continue to do this forever?
So there's small cycles and there's much larger cycles. For example, if you use the example, look at 1971 and they went off gold and everyone said the world would end, and they ended up doing that. Well, what they did is they did a free float, and everyone trusted that the dollar's good for it by having the largest military and the largest economy after the World War II post era. And actually America was making a lot of stuff at that time. They still had a large amount of production as well. What subsequently happened is, and that they had a low debt. So it's fine for you to say, I'll dip into my credit card. If you and I are very frugal guys and we make $250,000 a year and we spend 100,000 on our homes and lifestyle, and then I say to you, let's go on holiday and I'll put some of it on my credit card. It hasn't been It isn't malfeasance or corruptible to my long-term sustainability. As long as I'm earning that amount and all of that, I can go spend 20 grand on a holiday for 2 weeks. We can go scuba diving and all of that. I'll probably have the means to deal with that. It's when my income slowly starts to go down and goes from 250 to 200 to 150, and my living costs goes from 150 to 175 to 200. And then eventually you get to a situation where actually I'm juggling credit cards because my income is now 150 and my living expenses are 225. And I'm rolling a personal loan at the end of each year and dumping it with a new bank, and I'm building debt. Eventually the shoe drops. What you can see is there's a clear progression. If it was a perfect cycle and we just came back to America and America was still one of the biggest producers, still hadn't built up any, was back where it was just after World War II, we could continue to repeat the decades of 1945 to 1970 many times over, and build up the credit card to that point and come back round. We're not captured in a vortex. We've actually moved forward, and small decisions that were made here that seemed small have micro compounded over multi-decades into big decisions that have created massive problems. So eventually you get to the point where you've taken too much of the drugs and your body can't take it anymore. You've put too much of the debt, and the bankruptcy courts are looking at you funny and thinking you can't pay your utility bills and your rent, and they should move in and seize what you have before you have a quiet little second-hand for cash sale and sell off all your assets and then walk in with your mum holding something over for you after the debt phoenix event you're going to go through. So that's kind of where we are now. You've burnt you've painted the floor and you've moved to one corner in the room. You've now painted the whole room in red blood, and there's only one corner left, and you're still painting ever closer to your feet now. There is a finite amount of room to move in all things when it comes to debt, in the same way as there's a finite amount of cake that you and I could eat, and lines of cocaine that a drug addict can snort or crackhead can snort before eventually they either overdose or they've done terminal damage to their body. And we're at that point in a financial sense, and the markets are showing that. And gold is showing that. And that's why we're now on a short fuse to collapse. And it is that bad, and it will affect absolutely everyone, including you. If you say, well, I don't have much, and let it all burn down, I might get a better go at the new system. Let me tell you, you've got way more to lose. Your parents will lose stuff. Your inheritance will go down. Even if you own nothing, your claim to any property you have, your parents' claim to property might come under challenge. You might find that you're all on the street like homeless people. And then there's riot type vibes, and then you queue up and get your shot and get your UBI allocation, and you shut up when you're spoken to, and you don't do any hate speech, and you are being monitored, watched, and listened. And these are the rules. And then you're now in the technological oligarchical gulag that they've been planning. And in truth, I don't think too long for survival, because these are nice people. They are, in terms of how they view the rest of the world, they are nice people. In fact, that rather there were less of you, it represents less challenges to their authority, less people that are seeing what they do, and as a result. So we're in the war of the worlds, it's come. You chose this time, and it's here.
Yeah, definitely seems like it's going to be a difficult period. So, you mentioned that it seems like the one thing that's sort of benefiting from this, as you mentioned, is gold. Everything else is, bonds are going down massively. Stocks have sort of gone up, but not that much. Bitcoin's gone up a little bit. But gold seems to be sort of the outlet for all of this concern, all this issues to go, and I guess silver to an extent as well, and other commodities. So do you see that? I know you said you're sort of writing an article about this at the moment. What are you currently seeing the gold market, and can it continue to keep going up at this rate, because it's at a monumental
more. Yeah, so it's early doors for people that go, I missed this 3,550. It hasn't started. The scale of the malfeasance people have no concept of. You need to go to their website. I think it was called Demonocracy, that did visual representations of debt and did pallets of dollars, for various things. I've just done a search. The most conservative true debt to GDP when you count in unfunded liabilities, Medicaid, welfare in America is in the 450-550 range, according to Grok. Chicago professors had it at 660. That was in 2018 or 19. It was that long ago. The more aggressive, the more mainline, and most assumptions aren't going to be met. You're probably through 1,000. It's unpayable. It's unpayable. And the commitments that were made are going to be reneged upon as well. So you're talking about a whole base, people that paid for a certain service, and they're going to be told, sorry, this just when they need it, as a pensioner or someone who's now long-term ill, they're going to be told, well, you need to make a contribution, you need a family member to pay, or we have to do this, or we can only offer you this, a whole reduced service, which will be very rudimentary. How about some assisted dying? What do you say to that? We'll help you die sweetly, you'll get a nice dream, and we'll give your heirs a few thousand. Watch out for that trend to grow. There's going to be a massive push, and they're going to promote it. And the same evil people are going to be promoting it to soft, weak-minded people and people in pain with no money as well. So watch out. It's, I've strayed a little bit, I think, from your question, but the point is there's quite a lot coming down the chute our way. And the debt is unpayable. It's mathematically unpayable. And the American debt level is the worst, and they fall off the highest ladder. But the West as a whole is going to do very badly. America does worst, then the rest of the West, just behind it. In some senses, some bits will be maybe sooner. I've thought for a while, maybe the United Kingdom will go have a debt crisis before America. Their rates have gone higher than Americans on the same benchmark debt. They are clearly going to collapse. But, France, Europe, there's going to be collapses there too. There's master puppeteers that have an agenda that everything is going pretty well for them in terms of that, and not too good for the layman who thinks that the future is random. What do? You hunker down, you prepare for a fight, you get remote, you get out of the war zones, you get out of the worst affected nations, you build business, you use the internet and scalability to do that, and you value add to people. Our value add is very clear. You need to build wealth. You need to get paper that allows you to travel and reside in multiple countries. You need banks that aren't in the Western SWIFT system. That doesn't mean everything will be just rosy with all the other banks either, but you need optionality. 9/10 of all plans will still probably fail, but the fact that you have the one that wins and you don't know what it is, and part of one that might half work, is what will give you an existence in an environment where all the others are absolutely helpless. If you've got long life food, you're on a farm, you've got a great relationship with farmers, you're doing work, you're building a community of silver coin payment system, and everybody is working together and is of like-minded, you're in a very strong place, especially if you're in a country that isn't in the Western world. So if you can do that, and go back to basics. We're going to value a farmer again. We're going to value food supply, power and water independence. Another two things that I don't compromise on. I have solar everywhere. I have batteries for an extended period in my places where I live. And the fact that I'm my age and I'm able to do that, don't be upset. You can start on that journey. I might think some part of it is going to start soon, but the whole process is going to be decades. The whole process will be decades. They're not going to have the whole world on biometrics and everybody on a social score tomorrow. And there will be some countries which will be more liberty orientated, a bit slower to take up. There'll be a lot of things. And who says that's if everything goes perfectly according to their plans? So, I set a real low bar, and then, a bit of luck, and some things get reversed. There's pushbacks, who knows? But you've got to get out of the sights, and the West is in the sights, London is in the sights, and the UK has got a very poor future. It doesn't produce. It runs huge trade deficits. I mean, it's something I can even show you. I just had one up diagram. You're based in the UK. We started our journey in the United Kingdom ourselves. I'm on a British passport, and My father was English, so I don't say this with glee. This is not, let me spoil your day. Ha, 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 what joy. It's more about, if I can shock you into some action, then you will be better off. Share the screen. We'll go entire screen. Have a look at this. So the British debt is turning into a problem. It's not only Britain, it's worldwide. But if you just have a look at this, this is who you trade with. This is the United Kingdom's trade. And I want to just show you, these are exports. This is where you get money in. So the United Kingdom exports 60 billion, 60.4 billion to America. And it imports 57.9. So in one of the largest consumer nations that runs deficits with everyone, the Eurozone, huge Eurozone deficit, huge China deficit, huge deficit with most countries. People make stuff to sell in American markets. You barely have a 3 billion. You have a 2.5 billion out of total of 60 billion trade. So you're buying as much of their stuff almost as they're buying of yours. The biggest consumer nation that represents about 4% population of the world, that has had disproportionate high wealth compared to the rest of the world, that's all going to get flattened. It's the great leveling, this process. To Germany, for example, you sell 33.8 billion to Germany. You buy from Germany 73.8 billion, 40 billion more. 40 billion more. The long and short, we can go through each country. You sell to the Dutch 30.9 billion, you buy 53.2. I mean, it just keeps going. You sell to the Irish. Let's go with France, the next one. France buys 24.8 billion. That's tourism, French coming to London, whatever the case may be. You buy in wines and French products 41.3 billion. We can go through all the nations, but the bottom line is you have a deficit here of 187 billion. Out of a total import of goods, nearly 600, you don't have exports to 400, to the tune of 400. So 4 is to 6, divide both sides by 2, 2 is to 3.
Yeah, well, it was a capital economy that relied on everyone bringing their money to the UK, and now it's all leaving. So then this is obviously this is the issue. Now it's going to be completely unsustainable because you
and
don't
services,
have international
where
capital.
services were a bunch of lawyers designing a derivative contract for a European bank or something and charging wacko hours. How much do you think that business survives versus good old steak, eggs, and dairy, for example, in the food environment once we have a major debt-based crash? How many derivative lawyers are there going to still be around selling clever products with maths degrees and everything? You're right. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. That means the rest goes on debt often.
Yeah.
So there's either a steady outflow out of Britain to the tune of 200 billion. So let's just call it simple: 600, 400, 200 shortfall. You're a net importer. You're not quite America. America runs the worst deficits and is the most indebted, but you don't have a pound like they have a dollar to send out that everybody accepts as a currency of the world. So that is people that are either borrowing or sending money permanently out. If I'm buying 50% more of your stuff than you are of mine, which is the situation here, 400 to 600, I am sending 50% of my money offshore all the time to somebody else. So where's that money coming from? I'm sending my income offshore that is not getting invested in the United Kingdom, 50%, or maybe I should say 1/3 if we're talking about the fact that we're getting 400 back, we're buying 600. So you permanently are sending offshore. Think of money and business and exports like blood. It's blood circulating in a system. You are lying there, and 1/3 of your blood is being siphoned off to other people. How are you going to be looking in that hospital bed? Everyone else is blood doped up and positive, and they're sitting with all your blood, and you're like this. You can't make enough of this stuff. That money blood system, it's a fail. It's a huge fail. And of course, you've got proper clown show in terms of your Fabian Society politicians that are essentially Marxists in disguise, that are bringing the agenda, that are 100% plan this fail. They plan this fail, and they will crash a lot of things, including the housing market, the long end climbing. We can have a look at British long end as well, if you would like to see. Let's have a look at what's going on there. If we go to the GB 30-year.
I think it's one of the worst in the G7.
It is, and it's getting worse. It's not loading. Doesn't want to load it. Had a bit of trouble with trading view. It's also not loading.
No, that's right. All good. But then, I guess gold. Because I think gold is sort of the key thing that you were sort of talking about before as one of the avenues that could really benefit.
That's right. I mean, one of the key things is are you listening to the right people? Listen to this guy's message. Look at him. He's in his black glasses and white shirt, and he's telling you all these doomer things. Actually, there's lots of opportunity in these environments, by the way. That's the downside. It's just the 95% that don't understand are going to get cold. The 5% that do, of which 4% will be insiders, you can be that 1% that understands the insider's game and recognize where things go and use the tools that they use to protect themselves and build wealth. Debt is a crash. So we told everybody debt will go down. What's happened? Debt's gone down. Long end, we told you a TLT, a long end, it continues to go down of long end debt. We told you gold will go up. We've been investors on a sustained basis in gold, particularly gold. First, we told the people don't rush so fast into silver. Silver will go up later and harder, but the gold silver ratio is still a tiny bit high. We need it to technically break down so that it's now we need the mania, but we still stack it as an investment. We're just talking in terms of trading. So we are stacking at an investment and trading. And right now the trade on gold, I'm sitting here and, I'm 6-digit sums up in days. And it's easy money, but that's somebody, a nurse doesn't earn that in 5 years, but who's trading long gold for her? Nobody. And she gets crushed. And it's a sad fact, because she's doing something very vocational, very kind. She's just not money educated, or she doesn't have anyone who is in her life. And that's an terrible consequence, because good people that do good things that you need in society, paramedics, nurses, veterinarians, maybe, unfortunately, the big lesson and the learning for everybody in this world is your money, your problem. Find out how the game goddamn works and choose your advisor right, and listen and learn so that you can also tell BS if you're being advised by somebody who's a charlatan. There's no commission paid for me to show here. You're not paying me to be here. I'm glad to be here, by the way. I'm not requiring payment. I'm just saying it's a message that I'm consistently repeating, and I want as many people to hear it, because vocationally, I want to help people, because I need a nurse when I fall off my motorcycle. I need a doctor, I need a vet, and they don't deserve to get crushed by all of this. They don't need to be hurt, and I don't want them hurt. And I want them to watch this material. That's why this is free. You giving it out for free. Thank you. You're playing your part. You're doing God's work. I'm trying to do the same. And my message is simple and clear. And we continue to get endorsed. And as I say, from my newsletter in 2009, at the base of the great financial crisis, when I was talking in a trade room, I was saying how this September and that September are almost the same, but for one key thing. You don't get to do QE 1, 2, and 3, and in COVID, the big COVID splurge spend to the same degree. Borrowing is far harder. The rate required is far higher. And the underwriting for retail, because someone will say, well, the government will lend to each other. They're a crooked bunch. They'll just put the interest rates up. You try borrow to buy a house now without sufficient income, without sufficient deposit, those won't be open. And those days of zero downs in America are going to go away for vets, in the army. Don't worry, we'll get you in. You just make your payment, all of that. There's housing that's being bought out there like that still today. but for specific groups. And I can tell you, it doesn't end well for those people when those assets re-rate downwards and the government can no longer pay their pension and their job at the checkout store is no longer needed because of AI, robotics, immigrants, whatever else they've done, and they can replace paying that wage. And everything is not humane. The AI, the robotics, all of this is anti-humane, and it replaces basic labor. And what happens is you always represented labor and an income stream. They lived off your work. That's what paid the interest on that exorbitant privilege that the government borrowed from the bankers on with that exorbitant privilege. You were the collateral for that. And now, if a robot can do it almost as well as you and doesn't take days off, doesn't need feeding and housing, they don't need the same amount of labor. You know, the world in their eyes is made up of capital, entrepreneur, and labor. You know, that's how we used to manufacture. That the Industrial Revolution was built on that. You would have rows and rows of people. You still sometimes see it in the old school Chinese factories, all working terrible hours, sitting on top of each other in little desks, each one having to sew a certain amount of things. Well, those kind of factories don't exist anymore, or are being phased out. That kind of human capital of labor is being phased out. You have to find a role for yourself that's not easily replaced. Trust me, I'd rather deal with a person. I'm sick to death with chat bots and everything. So the notion that there won't be any roles is absolutely wrong. I'd rather talk to a fellow human being and know I'm talking to a fellow human being. You know, if you're going to a psychologist or you're going to a doctor, I don't want a perfect grok bot there. That's going to be low-end stuff. That's what you do from home just to get a quick view when it's almost like a search special, you know, a very special search where you can have a bot read out all the most probable criteria. In long term, though, there will be technological advances that if you're not a peasant and you haven't been surfed out, that you probably could tap into technologies that will extend your life, give you incredible quality, detect illnesses before you have them, all sorts of things. You know, toilets that will check, you know, all your samples that you are leaving in there and detect things long before there are even issues. So technology can be your friend, but in the wrong hands, which it certainly has ended up, and it's been scaled and ended up in statists' hands that are all blackmailable by a death cult. That's the worst place for all your best tech to be set up, because there's not altruistic people out there. And it took me a long time to realize that there's a lot of people that look at you as a useless eater who's taking up space, oxygen, and why are you even afforded an experience called life? But they are, and they're in high places as well.
Yeah, great message. So Francis, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. If anyone wanted to find out more about your work and what you do, where would the best place for that be?
Well, we're making a lot of money. We're making a lot of money in gold. As I say, money isn't everything. And I would like the nurses of this world to be making the money. I would like the good people of the world to be making their money. You might be one of them. You might be an engineer. I don't particularly choose professions. I just raised that one. But the TheCryptoSniper YouTube channel is where we talk about a lot of things around the world, markets and what we expect to move and how we intend to invest and long-term trade. We're not day traders. I'm not trying to make a 9-screen guy out of anybody here. This is set and forget trading, where you can leave an order in the system with a known stop loss that is already pre-sized and make asymmetric rewards, because you're getting fast-moving breakouts that are quickly moving away from your entry, which can help with securing assets, securing options, and securing yourself a multi-planetary, I don't want to say multi-planetary, that sounds like Elon, a multi-continent at least, and country-based existence with options. That doesn't mean you have to live in 3 different houses. Not all of them have to be bought, etc. You can have an existence with different residencies and secure your future in a time where there are active dark forces. And don't be unlucky. Don't be in the wrong place. And with that, also appreciate your life with a lot of people that of like-minded, and that's our community. Start with the YouTube channel. There's a link to book a call if you'd like to find out more about all our different products. which include payment plans as well. We know it's a recession here. We know people have been hurting. Designed to help get people started on that great journey. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. I'll put that in the description below. But yeah, thanks again for your time.
All the best, guys. And bye-bye to everybody.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate the support. If you've got value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or comment, good or bad feedback. I'm always open to that. But it really helps with the channel. As I said before, only about 14% of people actually subscribe to this channel. So if you were to that, it would really help. It could mean we could continue to grow. If not, thanks for watching and see you on the next show. And you also might like this video right here. All right. Thanks again.